Story 1. It wasn't that she cheated. It was who she cheated with. I just went to get tested for every sexually transmitted disease known to man. That person was literally a walking biohazard. Story 2. My initial reaction was that I felt like a character in a simulation, standing there with flowers in hand. My brain couldn't process it. Everything seemed to freeze for a moment. I don't even remember much of what happened afterward. Story 3. I didn't find out my ex cheated until after we broke up, but I shrugged it off and said, yeah, that figures. Story 4. It's very traumatic. As a 40-year-old man, I don't use that word often, and it's not part of my regular vocabulary. It pulls the soul out of your body, and you become soulless for a time. Hollow. Just think, everything you thought you knew, every comfort you thought you had, and every insecurity you ever thought existed did and then didn't in the next instant. Quite literally took me from one place in this universe and set me in another, and I won't ever be able to go back. My mother did it to my father when I was a young child, and then I chose a wife who did it to me. Can strangle generations. Please don't do it to someone. Story 5. There was confrontation, intense gaslighting, denial, shutting down, giving it another chance, leaving, and then playing the victim. Story 6. Initial thoughts and reactions were more about insecurity and feeling unworthy of true love. Then I remembered that it's his loss. Story 7. At first, I couldn't believe it. Then I started replaying every little moment in my head, wondering if there were signs I missed. It was like my brain turned into a crime investigation show. Story 8. I told my partner that their friends were leading them down that path months earlier. When they cheated, I just looked on and ended things. I saw it coming. Story 9. The shock of realizing that I did not know this guy was overwhelming. He seemed to be one person, but he was actually someone completely different. I felt nauseous and began to question my ability to judge someone's character. It felt as if I did not know the truth about my own life. It was our 3rd year of marriage. We could not keep our hands off each other, and we had a baby. It was devastating. Story 10. I felt I was the problem. I wasn't attractive enough. If I had put more effort into my appearance, it would never have happened. Story 11. In those movies how there is some nuclear bomb blast and they play that high-pitched white noise? The actor is standing there dazed, covered in dust, just mute with ringing ears. That's what it felt like to get the "Hey girly" message. I received it right as I walked into a class full of 30 teenagers. I sort of had to disconnect from my body for a moment, just mumbled and nodded, and wordlessly put on some random movie for them to watch as I got my thoughts together. I texted a colleague to come. I realize now I went into shock. Adrenaline pumping, my mind was racing. Within an hour, the adrenaline wore off, my class got covered, and I was shaking, trying to make my horrified and devastated coworkers feel better about the fact that they were watching me lose my mind by cracking jokes, but crying while doing it. It was messed up. I do not recommend it. Story 12. I went to her house to surprise her and take her out to breakfast. She let me in and was obviously nervous about something. I saw her neighbor's sneakers at the foot of the stairs and then heard him cough upstairs. My initial reaction was probably better than it should have been. I didn't charge upstairs or scream. I think I said, "Are you kidding me?" Then I just turned and walked out. I never spoke with her again. I heard they got married and then divorced a few years later. I'd like to say I was fine and that I was over it, but I'm pretty sure I was clinically depressed for the next 6 months. I thought she was the one. I got better. I got married 2 years later, and I've been married to the same woman for 18 years, and I have 3 kids. Story 13. It made me question my ability to judge others. I had trusted him completely. His behavior seemed so out of character. Years later, looking back, I can see that love is blind. The man is truly untrustworthy. In retrospect, I had a fortunate escape. Story 14. When I found out my boyfriend cheated on me, I was upset not so much because of the cheating itself, but because of the person he cheated with. My initial thought was, "You cheated on me with that?" Story 15. I went through all the stages of grief. It broke me and I was very angry. I then thought about what I could have done differently to prevent that from happening. At first I thought, I should have never let her have male friends. I then realized how wrong my thinking was. You don't own your partner. You can't control what they do. If they want to cheat on you, they will. The solution is not to force your partner to be faithful. The solution is to be with someone who wants to be faithful to you. Seeing things that way allowed me to view my ex as a person, not just my partner. People do what they want to do, and her actions proved she just wasn't happy with me. It allowed me to mentally let her go, not painting the story as if she were a villain and I was a victim. She was a person and I was a person. She hurt me, but being hurt is the price of attempting to find love. I knew I never wanted to cause that pain to someone else, and I deserve better, so I didn't actually lose anything. Story 16. I was crushed and felt like a fool. He was my first love. We were together for nearly 20 years. I was naive and didn't want to believe it until it was right in front of me. Story 17. Relief, then anger. Relief because I finally realized I was being manipulated, and my gut feeling that something was wrong was right the whole time. Despite my ex turning my accusations around and claiming my lack of trust had damaged our relationship, months of self-doubt lifted immediately. Anger for obvious reasons. I confronted my ex, calling her all sorts of names, and informed everyone I knew, including her work colleagues, about the situation since she cheated with a colleague. I regret calling her names but not letting her colleagues know. I was close to not finding out, but I'm so glad I did. Story 18. Never saw it coming. She confessed to being unfaithful with 4 other men during our 6-year relationship. When she told me, I felt dizzy and nauseous and then proceeded to vomit. I am still undergoing therapy 2 years later. Story 19. A feeling of insecurity I have never been able to completely shake, as the guy looked similar to me but slightly younger and less polished. Story 20. My first relationship lasted 4 years and we were engaged to be married. My initial thought and reaction was disbelief and shock. I trusted him completely. Without any hint or evidence days before finding out, I felt sick to my stomach as if I was going to throw up. Something wasn't right and I didn't know why. When we saw each other, I asked to use his phone, and he became very defensive. I had no intention of going through it. This was something I did regularly for various reasons. Obviously, that made me uncomfortable and I told him I respected his privacy, but there's a difference between privacy and secrecy. The way he was acting suggested he was hiding something. Then he told me everything. I asked to see his phone and went through the messages between him and the girl who was his coworker. Lesson learned. I grew from it, and we now have absolutely nothing to do with each other. This was years ago. Story 21. I'm about 1 month out from my 20-plus year relationship ending due to her infidelity. The shock, grief, and panic I felt when I realized what was happening were completely devastating. I believe it will take me a long time to recover, potentially years. Story 22. I confronted him with proof, and he continued to lie about it. I gathered my belongings and left him. I have not seen him since. Story 23. Complete shock and numbness overcame me. Then it quickly turned to fury, and I made it clear just how enraged I was, coming from someone who rarely loses her temper. I have never seen myself that angry or heard my voice get that loud before. Story 24. She cheated with my best friend, and I don't know what actually happened. It was quite a while ago, and we were very young. To this day, she claims I ran away too quickly from her because that's who I am. When things go wrong, I always run and close the doors. Anyway, there is sadness because that day and night, I lost 2 people I cared about. I have never allowed myself to get that close to anyone again. Story 25. I had thought that was one thing he'd never do to me. I realized how foolish I was when months of frustration started accumulating in my mind. Story 26. Rage, hurt, and betrayal. I have never in my life experienced so many emotions in such a short time frame. It is a pain that is almost difficult to explain. Story 27. It's surprising how our brain constructs a timeline of our lives. When you find out your partner cheated, you essentially uncover a separate timeline, which can be challenging for your mind to reconcile. You may begin to merge the timelines by asking questions like, who was it with? When did this happen? How long did it go on? Even with those answers, it can be difficult to accept the reality, especially if there were no prior signs that something was wrong. I tried to work through it because I loved her, but she was not willing to. I learned she had been cheating on me with a coworker from her night shift for about 6 months and eventually ended up marrying that person. Meanwhile, I went through years of therapy and took antidepressants. I am doing much better now after 6 years, and I have a healthy relationship along with incredible communication and trust with a partner who chooses me every day. Story 28. My boyfriend cheated on me with my best friend while I was asleep in the same house. I obviously didn't act rationally, and I should have acted differently. Story 29. My primary thought was why. I supported us financially and emotionally and handled all of the housework. He traveled a lot for work but expected me to do everything at home, which I assumed was because we were a partnership and I supported his career goals. I supported his career for years and foolishly ignored my instincts telling me something was wrong. Even though I was the one who asked for a divorce, I struggled with the concept of why I wasn't good enough. Crying all the time was my emotional reaction. During the divorce process, he became extremely angry. Even my divorce attorney commented that in their 20 years of practice, they had never met someone so hostile before. He even threatened that he had a bomb in his bag during mediation, which was unexpected. We married somewhat young, and I definitely had blinders on. No one can give you self-respect like you can. Story 30. I found out my ex was cheating through his friend, who discovered that his girlfriend was cheating with him. The friend called me and calmly explained the situation. I laughed because I thought it was a prank, then hung up and continued my day. Things got serious when the friend came to my house crying. I was just angry. Story 31. It was a chain of thoughts in quick succession. This person, I'll confront him. Actually, he's bigger than me and practices mixed martial arts, and he will have his brother with him. But this person, I'm going to ask her to leave. However, her name is on the lease. I'll endure, but that will break my child's heart. Fine, I'll stay, but she's going to have to do a lot to make this right. We were together for a few more years, and she still treated me poorly during that whole time. Story 32. Initial thought. Why? And when did it start? Physical reaction. I started shaking, experienced shortness of breath, had cold sweats, and tears welled in my eyes before I went into shock. I just stared at the wall. Emotional reaction. I felt hurt and angry. Couldn't believe it. I also started doubting myself. Story 33. Shock. 16 years come down to this. No wonder she showed no interest in fighting for us. There was no more us. It was them. Story 34. The most intense rage I have ever felt in my life. I drove to his house to confront him, and I think I ran through every stop sign and light on the way. I started yelling at him before I was even fully out of the car. I was only 22, so it was a strong reaction. Story 35. I informed their family, my family, close mutual friends, and their employer, who was also the affair partner and knew my spouse was married, about the situation. I even reached out to the affair partner's family to share what I knew. I posted about my spouse in Are We Dating the Same Guy Facebook groups. I do not regret any of it. I simply told the truth. Story 36. In today's society, you should not be shocked by this. I told my wife to let me know if she is feeling that way about someone else, and I will help her pack. Be an adult, acknowledge that it's not working, and give the other person the dignity of being released before any issues arise. Story 37. I was an absolute wreck. My mind went into a dark place for at least 6 months, especially since it was the beginning of our relationship and everything felt blissful. I was devastated and did not expect that at all. I stayed for 5 years, and now I am not sure if I am happy. She is very introverted, which also took me by surprise, and I was involved with someone who was not the right fit. Someone who struggles with substance abuse, lives at home, and does not have a job. I am a professional and a homeowner, and I like to think of myself as an all-around good person. It bothers me right now to answer this question. Story 38. I threw my head in my hands and shouted, "Oh my God!" I told her she had just thrown 7 years down the drain. Story 39. Anger turned into wondering why I wasn't good enough and questioning what was wrong with me. The same guy has cheated on every girl he's been with. I was not the problem. Story 40. Well, that just happened. I have firmly believed that cheaters are dishonest individuals, so finding out she cheated on me made me lose any care I had for her. Story 41. Complete disbelief. I had recently ended a relationship because of infidelity, and this new guy seemed perfect. He told me he loved me and would always say, "I don't understand why anyone would ever cheat on you," all while being unfaithful to me. Kind of messed me up for the next guy. Story 42. Not gonna lie, I actually vomited. Many thoughts went through my head, mostly disgust and shock that they weren't the person I thought they were, but I learned a lot from the experience. We have all heard the saying, "Don't bite the hand that feeds you." And while it seems obvious, humans somehow find ways to do the dumbest things, even when they make no logical sense. Story 43. Brain stops, processing facts takes longer than usual. Then you go into denial mode, followed by becoming belligerent. It ultimately ends with depression. Story 44. I had black and white proof in front of me in the form of messages. My immediate response was numbness in my legs, followed by total denial. I thought, I must be misunderstanding something here. So, I called her and told her someone had messaged me, saying they had seen her in a specific situation described in one of the messages, and they were trying to give me a heads up. I asked if it was true or not. She denied it firmly, and because I wanted her denial to be true so badly and I wanted my assumption that I had misunderstood to be true as well, I accepted it, even though my heart knew it was a lie. A few weeks later, we had a minor argument that she suddenly escalated into, "And yes, I have been cheating on you this whole time. It was some of the worst pain I ever experienced." Story 45. It was years ago. I'm fine now. Please don't send a warning. We had been married for quite a while, had a couple of kids, and were expecting another. I noticed that on our shared computer she had been emailing someone and wasn't keeping track of boundaries in her communication with him. Nothing specific, just not the distance you'd expect between two coworkers. I told her this, and she apologized, saying she hadn't even noticed but that I was right and she would watch out. Everything was fine. I trusted her. A few months later, she changed her email password, and things seemed off. I figured out her password, and it appeared that things had progressed with the boundaries guy. I wish I had just left then, to be honest. But she minimized everything, and we were expecting another baby. She ended it, and they never really did anything, except I found out bits and pieces along the way that she was lying about everything related to this. Never a big enough lie to make me walk out, but always enough to ensure I would never believe anything she says about this, and I would always assume the worst. To be honest, we have a great relationship otherwise, and our kids are fantastic. I just have to live with someone I can never truly trust about this, always knowing that I was never enough for the one person I really wanted to be everything for. Story 46. You sort of just expect it. If you don't give her attention because you're busy, then many guys will be gaslighting her in direct messages. Story 47. I contemplated whether I could get away with smothering him in his sleep. I weighed my options and decided to ruin his life instead of mine. Story 48. I found out later after we broke up. Well, the story is, it was a highly toxic relationship, and the other person had a very traumatic personality. I decided to break up, and the breakup was traumatic for me. For 3 months, I was down and out, having no idea what was happening around me. 3 months later, I was on my Instagram app, trying to log in because I had shut down all my social media when I broke up with her. By God's grace, while attempting to log into my account, I accidentally logged into her account. She had used my phone once a few months back to log in, so I guess the passwords got saved. As I accessed her account, I found messages regarding a guy she had previously claimed was just a friend, with a message on top saying, "I love you more." I thought to myself, let's check since when this was happening between them. I scrolled back and reached dates that were even before our breakup. From that moment on, I instantly moved on. Discovering that instance of cheating prompted me to let go. I felt fine from that very instant. I prayed to God then and thanked him for that breakup. Whatever God's will is always right. Trust God. Story 49. I put my heart and soul into this. A significant portion of my life was spent with you. I would never do such a thing to you. You can't just place a hotel on Park Place while I'm in the bathroom. Story 50. Extreme anger. I found out about a week after we broke up. I had confronted her several months earlier but never directly accused her. The relationship was rocky, and I didn't want to push her away if I was wrong. Once I discovered the truth, I ended up sending her a message expressing my anger that supposedly made her cry. That felt satisfying. Story 51. I am pretty sure I had a panic attack, with uncontrollable shaking and shortness of breath. Then came the self-doubt, breakup, and the need to distance myself from the person. Story 52. It's like you lock up or freeze. Your brain is going too fast for you to physically move, or at least it feels that way. Your stomach hurts from the gut drop feeling, your throat feels closed up, and you can't speak. Personally, I was shaking the whole time. I couldn't even click buttons on his phone, the only relationship in which I ever looked through a phone, and I clearly had a reason to. I wept silently while trying to sleep next to him and confronted him in the morning when the anger set in. You grieve. The thought is usually, why? I trusted you. How could you do this? Why? Story 53. I had the worst sinking feeling in my chest, and I didn't quite believe it at first. I took pictures of everything and changed my phone password so he couldn't delete them. I confronted him, told him I had proof, and the first thing he did was grab my phone. He started screaming at me, accused me of cheating, and called me names when he couldn't unlock my phone. Story 54. It's like the ground under your feet disappears. Everything went hazy and heavy at the same time. 3 years later, I still remember the feeling. Story 55. I became very clingy and lost all my self-respect. I felt like a strange person, but I was just young. Story 56. I thought about how we were together all the time. We were inseparable. Then I wondered what was wrong with me. There must be something missing for him to seek another person. Story 57. I was hurt. I took a road trip the following weekend and had a long, self-reflective conversation with myself. I saw the red flags and ignored them. I promised myself I would do better at choosing a partner and gave myself compassion for my past choices. I also laughed every time she texted me in the following years, as she would always start the texts. The best thing I did was to forget about her, not blame myself for her actions, and live a better life. Story 58. I was definitely in a state of shock and felt very numb for hours after I found out. It almost felt like an out-of-body experience. I couldn't believe this was happening. However, I had my suspicions leading up to this moment, so when everything fell apart, one of the first emotions I felt was relief. It was a relief to confirm the suspicions I had held for so long. Story 59. Heart pounding, I couldn't sleep all night, then continued with my life until it happened again. I confronted the cheater, and she wouldn't admit what she had done, so I broke up with her. Story 60. The worst feeling in your stomach is like being punched from the inside. Thoughts rush in, trying to make sense of it all. You deny it, trying to rationalize that it didn't happen. Then you face the awful new reality. Story 61. A lifetime ago, one of my coworkers discovered that his wife was having an affair with her boss. Being the naive 20-something I lectured him about how he should immediately divorce her and take custody of their children. I couldn't understand why he was begging her to go to counseling and trying to save the marriage. I convinced myself that I would never do that. Less than 6 months later, I discovered my then-wife was having an affair. It was then that I understood what my friend had gone through. The moral of the story is not to be so firm with the victim, telling them what you would do in that situation, because you have no idea what you will do until it actually happens to you. Story 62. Anxiety, anger, sadness. Then I confronted him. He blamed me and I left. He was my first true love, and it broke my heart. Took me half a year to recover. Now that I look back, I see what a person of very low quality he truly was. Story 63. How could you quit your job, have a 4-month-old at home, and still be able to join a sexual cult? Story 64. I knew something was wrong, but I never guessed it was cheating. Then I realized all the things that lined up on the timeline. It was awful. I wouldn't wish it on anyone. Completely changed me as a person, and not for the better. Story 65. Did she really just sleep with someone at a Christmas Eve party she found attractive? Text me on Christmas, and then try to act as if our breakup was inevitable? Yes, she did. I don't even know what to say. I don't even want to say anything. Story 66. There were no thoughts. Felt like the earth was disintegrating beneath my feet. Then came the nausea and disbelief. Felt like I was about to pass out. Story 67. I just heard a loud buzzing sound in my ears for several minutes. It was my heart racing as I sat in silence. Story 68. I was physically sick and had a mental breakdown. I couldn't eat and lost 40 pounds. I was naive to think she would never cheat. Story 69. I was in the middle of an intimate moment when she said, "By the way, I was with Dale." Numb. I responded, "Did you enjoy it?" She replied, "Yeah, you can't forget something like that." Story 70. To get the antibiotics to cure the gonorrhea that my ex-husband gave me, I told him to take his things, leave my house, and never contact me again. He constantly accused me of cheating. If a man ever accuses you of cheating, run. They are projecting. Story 71. I remember the overwhelming sense of betrayal. I could feel my heart breaking. I truly thought he was my best friend. I endured so much for love, and this is how I was repaid. I was in such a fog for so long because he invested so much energy into pretending he loved me, but his actions did not align. I just couldn't understand. It created a mental block. The truth was he was cheating the whole time. His cheating made every "I love you," every "you're beautiful," and every "you're so cool and interesting" a lie. I realized I was never special to anyone. I gave up my youth to him. I gave up my pre-children body. And I gave up my ability to love genuinely without the fear of what if. I don't think I can ever trust again, honestly. Now, I'm convinced that love is only something a parent can feel for their children. Why he put so much effort into pretending he loved me and wasted even his own time, I will never know. Story 72. I wasn't surprised. Women cheating with their bosses is a tale as old as time, and we were clearly breaking up soon anyway. Story 73. She felt worthless. Then she cheated on him. After that, she got pregnant and he left her. It's a story as old as time. Story 74. It completely broke my mind for a while. Before, we were the happy couple. After, I was having panic attacks in traffic. Everything I thought was one way seemed to be the opposite. Up was down, good was evil, and so on. Took years to get over it. Even now, it occasionally resurfaces for a moment. But we are different people now. That was a lifetime ago. Story 75. I packed all of her belongings in boxes while she was at work. When she returned home, I assisted her in loading her car, and that was all. Story 76. Considering I walked into the house I owned when she was with someone else on the new furniture, my first thought was that I didn't pay for that service. My reaction. I walked away and called my attorney. Story 77. I felt foolish. I heard every time she told me I was the one and used words like true love. I felt so stupid. I think your immediate reaction is rooted in your childhood. If you didn't receive enough approval, you probably think, what did I do wrong? If you did receive it, you might respond with anger. I was a nerd and social outcast, so my instant reaction was based on that. It was like, of course I wasn't enough. Of course she doesn't love me. Why did I ever believe this? Story 78. Honestly, at first I started to laugh because I thought it was a joke. Then I saw purple spots in my vision. After that, it's hard to remember. I'm not sure I want to. But basically, it was something like, after everything I did for you. Much later, while doing some soul searching, I realized I was not powerless and that codependency is real. I finally felt like I was not a victim and that I could do something to feel better. Story 79. It didn't happen until I was emotionally mature, thankfully. I immediately realized that I was in love with the idea of the person I had created in my mind and not the physical being standing in front of me, so I shrugged it off. Story 80. It seems all the women in my life have betrayed me in some way, but my ex stands out the most. Now, even 2 years later, I feel numb. I'm still young, and girls show interest or indicate that they are available, yet I just don't care. Caring leads to pain, and loving is even worse. I actively avoid women in social settings, aside from work. I will never again trust a pretty smile or a concerned look as if they genuinely care. I'm content now. Story 81. I immediately called her mother to ask her to pick up my ex for the evening while I packed my things to move out. I then halfway cut one button, zipper, or strap of every dress she owned so they would eventually fall apart in the following months. Story 82. My initial reaction was one of indifference. I expected the person to act as they did. I was trying to make it work, but I would not recommend it. Story 83. This happened to me during a severe depression. I was in a vulnerable state, and she told me she was going to stay the night with another person. I reluctantly allowed it. 8 months later, the relationship ended, and I emerged from the depression. This was 8 years ago. Story 84. My heart dropped as I was sleeping in bed next to her. I woke up to let her know, then I crashed out. I yelled and threw her clothes and belongings out the door. I still remember that day. Eventually, I forgave her for it, and she broke up with me months later. It was quite a situation. Story 85. The first time it happened was absolutely devastating, like being stabbed in the heart. The next times I felt indifferent, as if everyone behaves that way. There are no surprises anymore. Modern women often seem like conditioned responses, similar to machines dispensing bubble gum and phones. Story 86. My ex broke up with me, and a few weeks later, I found out she was pregnant. Thankfully, we never got that far into the relationship, so I didn't need to be a guest on the show. Story 87. I left with a lot of self-doubt, wondering if I was the problem and what I had done wrong. It didn't help that we still ran into each other at university. It was gut-wrenching. I found comfort in food, which was a very bad idea, and gained a significant amount of weight. Thankfully, that was 4 years ago, and I've lost most of the weight and feel much healthier at the moment. However, life doesn't stop throwing challenges your way. Story 88. I felt like my soul left my body. I experienced tunnel vision and dissociated for a few hours. I was absolutely blindsided. At that time, I was deployed. My wife's closest friends messaged me and asked to video chat but requested that I not tell her about it. I was hesitant, but it was 3 of her closest friends and my cousin, so I didn't think it was inappropriate. They informed me that I should check my bank account and that she had been unfaithful with multiple men for several months. To summarize, she failed out of college while I was deployed, which I was funding, depleted $21,000 from our savings, and then was unfaithful with numerous people. When I say blindsided, I mean it. We communicated every chance we could. She often cried during our video chats about how difficult it was without me, how our son missed us, and talked about buying a house together and making future plans. She constantly expressed her love and appreciation for me, never once mentioning divorce or any issues in our marriage. Returning home with post-traumatic stress disorder to find divorce papers, still needing to provide for a woman who cheated on me, and having no money in the bank marked a very dark period in my life that lasted for years. Story 89. It was a toxic relationship for both of us. Neither of us was great, so I honestly don't blame him. It was an immediate decision for me. I was dealing with a lot of challenges outside of that relationship, so it took me some time to find the mental space to reflect and end it. However, I knew that it was time to move on. Story 90. I had known what he was doing for a while. He was reckless and didn't cover his tracks well. A friend even saw him with her. It gave me time to process it before I confronted him, and of course, he stumbled over himself trying to deny it and then finally told the truth. I'm grateful we never married and didn't live together. My mother told me that probably would have prevented it, though my father cheated on her too. I heard all the excuses for why she stayed, but it is what it is. It hit me hard after the fact. Looking back, I was relatively calm during it all, He was the one melting down. I will probably never trust anyone again, and it hurts. I like the idea of loving someone, wanting to be with them, and building a life together, and he wanted all of that with me. But whoever that might be doesn't deserve my baggage. Story 91. After my initial stand-up from the sofa, I said, "Oh my God," and felt butterflies. Weirdly, I became super concentrated after that. My partner spoke to me, and my brain went into some sort of disaster mode, allowing me to talk through and process everything. We went for a walk and talked. When we got home and continued talking on the bed, my body went into delayed physical shock. I was shaking uncontrollably, and it was very unpleasant and embarrassing. I was trying to hold it together. I didn't cry or get overly emotional, but she could see I was shaking. After that, my brain began processing, and emotional outbursts, upset feelings, and impulsivity surfaced as we tried to fix things. It was difficult seeing her sleep soundly next to me as if nothing was wrong while I was wide awake. This made me even more upset, especially with all the thoughts of, I owe him an explanation. I need to meet him to explain everything. Ultimately, I had to end the relationship as hard as it was. It was the hardest time of my life, and I wouldn't wish it on anyone. Story 92. Confusion. I had been doing everything right to the best of my knowledge and understanding. I set up weekly date nights. It wasn't anything big. I'm disabled, so often it was just simple things like making a blanket fort and watching Disney movies together. I wrote her little notes every day, telling her something I loved about her. Could be anything. The way she laughed, how beautiful her eyes were, or something she did that I appreciated. I also gave her 1 free cuddle coupons. Every 3 months, we would sit down to discuss how our relationship was going and address any dissatisfaction. I contributed to household cleaning. I initially cooked as well, but that stopped for unfortunate reasons. I encouraged her to pursue her hobbies and passions and to spend time with her friends. I brought her flowers and small gifts just because I thought she deserved them. I was confused. I was doing everything right, so what was wrong? It was a silly reaction, but it is what it is. Story 93. I wasn't even surprised, in all honesty. A girl I was with for a couple of months over 8 years ago was involved with my housemate. One of my other housemates was an absolute friend and told me that he saw her going up to his room while I was at work. He listened in and heard them together. I sometimes let her stay if she was working the next day, as I worked the night shifts. Safe to say her belongings that she kept in my room when she visited ended up outside, and my housemate had a nasty fall that resulted in a concussion requiring 4 stitches. My other housemates kindly helped him move his things out the following week and gave him a good farewell. I moved out, got my own flat, and then met my wonderful wife 4 years later. Story 94. Honestly, when I first suspected that the game was on, I eventually obtained proof and confronted her. Story 95. Unfortunately, I have a low sex drive, so it didn't come as a surprise at first. However, with the guy I had regular sex with, it did surprise me. It broke me. It wasn't even his cheating that bothered me the most. It was his lying to me about it when I brought it up. The woman told me, and I believed her. I just wanted the truth. However, as more time has passed and I have had more life experiences, I see those situations in a more nuanced way that I wasn't ready to understand at the time. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.